Welcome to Frequency. I'm Chuck Gose.
And I'm Jenni Field. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience, beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. And there are three things that are on my mind this week, Chuck, before we go into your articles for the week. And the first of those is playlists. And I wanted to ask a question because I think you're quite, I was going to say quite musical, but you quite like music, I think is probably the better
I'm
way
really
to
wondering where
phrase
this is going.
that. So every year I will create a playlist for my year. So it'll be songs that kind of mean something for me in that year, or it feels like something that will just really speak to me or feels relevant or whatever it might be. And I've done it for the last sort of 3 years. And it just got me wondering whether you have like a song for the year or whether you do anything like that. And if you do, what's on your list?
Yeah, I'm not maybe as seasonal as that when it comes to I do have sort of like my life playlist, and because I'm old, it's in Apple Music, not Spotify.
Oh,
So,
I'm in Apple Music too. I'm with you there.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. Damn those Spotify Wraps when they come out. I feel so jealous of it. So I have it more for my life. I don't get into the song of the year, but I know when my wife for her 40th birthday, I had all of her friends submit a song that reminded them of her, and then I put that into a playlist for her
Oh,
to like,
that's
because it was
nice.
from like her people, so to speak. There were some questionable choices in there, not gonna lie, but it was representative of her, which I thought was cool. So I do think there's things, and I've seen people also do that with events where they
Mm,
ask people. We've done that with Ecology, where they're like, we know what their songs are, so we put that into the playlist that then when we play like in quiet moments at events. So I do think there's a
yeah.
way to choreograph some of that from time to time.
Okay. But you don't have like a song of the year or anything like
I
that.
don't know. I
Okay.
mean, Duran Duran doesn't come out with new music every year, Jenny, so I kind of just go back to the same songs.
They are your favorite. Now tell us a bit about the Ecology Festival. We've mentioned it on the podcast before. It's not far away now. How's it going? How's it
Yeah,
shaping?
it's August 26th in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And as soon as I tell that to people, they're like, "Why are you going to Sioux Falls?" And my two responses are either why not? Because you have to host it somewhere. And two, because no one else will and no one else does. And there's a great comms community there that doesn't want to have to travel all the time. So we're bringing the event to them. It's a one-day event, affordably priced for people to be a part of. We've got a great lineup of speakers from CBRE, Mutual of Omaha, Sanford Health, Nebraska Medicine. We've got workshops, we've got keynote. Like it's just a fun event, and we keep it intimate. Some people would use the word small. I don't like that word. We keep it intimate at around 40 people.
Oh
This year's
no.
event is sponsored by Staff Base First Up and Lucy Hub, so it's great to have them involved with it. So yeah, just go to joinecology.com if you want to be a part of a really fun, unique community in-person event. It's really the one time a year we get together in person now. We have a lot of fun with the Flyover Festival.
Nice. And you can come to that whether you're a member or not, or do you have to be an Ecology member to
That's a
come?
great question. Members get a discount, but you do not need to be a member to join. So yeah, great point of clarity there.
Nice. We'll put a link in the show notes. And I did check because you called me out on LinkedIn about whether or not I would make it. And I had a look, and the cost of the flights was so much money
No,
because I got to go via Dallas, I think, to get there. So I
but
just
but I
got.
did want to point out, Jenny, you don't need to fly business class
I was
to get to Sioux Falls.
not. Oh, you're so rude. I was not. I didn't even have a bag. I was just going to go hand luggage. Oh dear. And then the only other thing I was going to mention today, because I have got the three things, is that it's our first frequency birthday, in that this episode is coming out on my birthday on July the 14th. And I get to have the first one because yours isn't till December.
It is. Yeah, you're lucky that you get to have a summer birthday. You're
Yeah.
blessed with a summer birthday. Not all of us have that. So yes, Jenny, happy birthday to you. This is coming out on your birthday. So as we're promoting and you're listening, please send Jenny all of the birthday wishes.
Thank you. Now, you've got about 5 articles, I think, for us today. What's on your list?
Let's call it 4.5 because
Okay.
two are sort of merged together. We'll get through the list here. But today we're digging into a theme that keeps getting louder on what happens when we push AI in places that it shouldn't go. Yes, the potential is exciting, but this week's stories raise some very human questions around AI. There's a Microsoft executive who suggested that laid off employees turn to AI for emotional support, a fresh take on hybrid work where your teammate might be a chatbot, and a reminder that responsiveness might be the most underrated leadership skill out there, and a pair of LinkedIn posts asking about internal comms folks, like what actually is yours and what's yours to fix. But let's first kick off with a story that captures where we are in this AI hype cycle when saving time might end up costing more. Jenni, this is a story that you shared with me, what I thought was interesting, and it's one that flips the AI promise on its head a bit. We've been told that generative AI will save us time, money, and effort, and that it'll automate the mundane and free up humans to do more meaningful work. But sometimes in practice, the opposite can happen. One freelance writer shared that she was hired by a hospitality company to, quote, punch up some AI generated content for a new website. The job, undo what AI had already done. She ended up rewriting all of it because the content was flat, impersonal, and lacked any real understanding of the brand and its tone. It's a growing phenomenon that I think communicators are paying attention to across industries, that AI is being used to accelerate creation, but then humans are hired to fix the inaccuracies, which you've talked about in previous episodes, remove the generic fluff, or completely rewrite it to sound like, you guessed it, a human. So instead of saving time, it's doubling the workload, and the clients aren't necessarily saving money either, because this particular project costs the company more than $2,000 in editing fees. So, Jenni, we have to ask, if AI needs this much human cleanup, what are we saving? So, my question to you is this part of just this early learning curve of using AI? Or do you think we're already seeing some of the hidden cost of overuse? And what advice would you give to communicators who feel the pressure to adopt AI without a plan for quality control?
So I found this really interesting. This was an article that was sent to me by Joe Twizzleton, who's part of my collective team, and I thought it was a perfect topic of conversation for us here. And there's two things to this for me. The first is that I do think it's part of the early learning curve where we don't know how to use prompts and data and all those things correctly. So I think if you don't understand it as an organization or an agency, and you're just going in and saying, here's a link to my website, refresh the copy. Like that's not a good enough prompt for it. I've been lucky enough to have some sort of small coaching sessions with an AI expert, which really helped me understand how to do the prompting, how to make sure I was getting the read of the tone of my work, and how to use that to help me draft some stuff. So for me, it's the early learning curve in that we're lazy, we're not learning how to prompt. But I also think that as communicators, we have the gift of being able to know how to do this properly. So we are able to look at something and go, oh no, that doesn't sound right. And we can just edit that. So it's very helpful when you want to get something started or you need some ideas. I use it quite a lot for sort of first drafts. I've had some first drafts come back that have just not worked at all and I've had to rewrite it. But I'm a communicator. I can write. I'm an author. I can do all those things. For me, this is more risky for the people that this is talking about, where they don't have those skills and then they are using it to try and do things quickly because they don't have the skill themselves. And that's where it's never, for me, that's never going to work. You either have to learn the skill of prompting or you have to learn the skill of writing, but you can't have neither of those things and then expect your copy and content on your website to be brilliant, because it's not going to
Mhm.
work. So, in terms of your question about what advice would I be giving who feel the pressure to adopt it, I think there is an element for us because we have that second skill. We can do the writing. If our prompts aren't good enough, we can still edit and do it. But I do think, like anything, you wouldn't just do a draft and then send it out the door. It has to be read, reviewed, edited, like any copywriting and content. It's not going to get rid of all of that. Definitely not.
And the thing is, I think that's what a lot of people are doing. And when I was thinking about this article, I would say I'm rarely inspired by the writing and content that I see out there. And that was before AI.
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot of mundane, boring copy, marketing speak, com speak stuff that was out there anyway, that people were just regurgitating some of the same things in different ways. So I think this is actually where the human element can elevate the
Mm.
content and make it more inspiring, make it more interesting, make it insightful. But I do think there's some people that are like, this is I don't want to spend the time on it. I
Yeah.
don't need to spend the time on it. And I think that comes across. Like you can
Yeah.
see that they
Yeah.
didn't want to spend the time on it. Maybe that's where they should have spent their time.
Yeah.
So it's the opportunity. We had this conversation just this week inside Ecology, where one of the members said the reason they don't like using AI is because they really enjoy writing.
Mm.
And I see the conflict there, but I also don't think there needs to be a conflict there. There's roles for both. You don't have to use AI for writing. You can use AI for so many other things
Yeah.
out there, like number of things. So I think as communicators, we put it in this pigeonhole of being a writing tool. Yes, it can do that, but there's also so many other things it can do. So don't let it do your writing if you don't want it to.
Yeah, and I think I use it for some of my drafting, but I use it more for interrogating data, researching, looking at lots of different articles and summarizing. I use it more for that than drafting content. So yeah, like you said, there's loads of different ways to do it. I'm going to come back to that point of you either have to learn to prompt or learn to write. If you don't have either of those things, you need one of them,
Mhm.
and that's the basics really.
And while we're talking about other uses for I want to go on to this story about a Microsoft executive who drew some controversy after advice to laid off staff. Let's talk about empathy or the lack of it. Earlier this month, a Microsoft executive posted advice to recently laid off employees suggesting they use AI tools like ChatGPT or Copilot to process their emotions. The idea, she said, was to lean on AI to help, quote, build confidence and navigate the career transition. Needless to say, Jenny, this did not go over well. The post was quickly deleted after backlash, with many people calling it dystopian, tone deaf, and an example of how tech leaders are completely missing the mark when it comes to the human experience. Now, to be fair, the exec probably had good intentions. We've all experimented with AI in different ways and journaling or whatever, and asked ChatGPT to perhaps even role play conversations as we explore different ways to use the tool. But offering a chatbot as a source of emotional support after a mass layoff feels a bit much. And it raises real questions about how companies are using or misusing technology in moments that demand genuine human care. For you, Jenny, is this just a case of bad messaging from a leader, or is it a symptom of something bigger, maybe an indicator, like leaders not understanding how to handle emotional fallout? And do you think there's any role for AI in helping people through tough moments, or is this a hard line we need to draw?
So I have a few thoughts on this. Um, I don't think it's a case of bad messaging. I think it's a case of bad leadership. Like, I don't think this is just, oh, that was a that there's a thought process there that has been gone through as a leadership team, because this isn't going to be just one person necessarily. There would have been a conversation about this, and no one's gone, I'm not sure that's a good idea. That's an issue that there hasn't been that discussion. This also speaks to the fact that there hasn't been a conversation about how are we going to support our staff through this significant change. That conversation has clearly not happened at all, which is a bigger leadership issue in that you're not demonstrating empathy, as we've talked about. You're not being supportive. You're not being someone that's vulnerable and going into that space. So there's a bigger thing here about how you are treating other human beings in your teams and why that conversation isn't happening. So for me, it's a bigger leadership issue. I also think you're right. I think it's that there is this lack of ability to handle emotional fallout. I don't think we're very good at that. We've had in the UK recently, we had Rachel Reeves crying in Parliament, and it's just gone everywhere about someone showing emotion, and social media and the traditional media have had a field day with that one because we don't know how to do with human emotion. So I think there is bigger stuff in here. I think it's a very misguided suggestion, and I think it speaks to a very weak leadership team. I would also say that I don't have a hard line on this. So I do have some friends that use ChatGPT as a sort of therapist role. We've kind of given them names, so we don't, say, have you spoken to Chat? We've kind of named them, and I can see how that's helpful when you're trying to work stuff out, but you don't necessarily want to talk to someone else because it feels very uncomfortable, or you don't have the funds to access that kind of support. And I know from experience of those around me, they have found that incredibly helpful to help them work through how they're feeling, why they're feeling like that, how do they deal with the situation, and just have someone to talk to that really isn't going to judge them. And I think that as much as we feel like when you're in therapy, there's no judgment, we're not really built that way. So I think that there is an element of that. So I do think it has a place, but I also, when I was talking to a friend of mine who was going to start using it, I did say to them, like, just make sure you're not using it all the time. So maybe have like an hour of time. So you're not just being in a constant state of being in there, because the that is a bit dangerous, I think. So I think it has a place for that, but I also don't think it has a place for it in the workplace in this context.
To me, this just feels like a very low EQ moment
Mm.
for this leader, because I do think there is a time and a place for maybe recommendations or suggestions like this, but this was not the time or the place to do that. And as someone who has been laid off in their career, I think it's leaders especially don't seem to recognize that emotional element to it. Yes, it's part of your professional journey, but it's also an emotional journey that it doesn't just impact you. So something that might seem as flippant as this leader suggesting, "Oh, just use AI, just use a chatbot to get through this," is not the message. Weeks later, months later, if it had been, "Hey, here are resources available," or "Have you tried this?" Like there's a time and a place for that,
Mhm.
but not in this moment where there is this high emotional moment that
Mm.
happens in your career. And I think it just shows that lack of understanding of that impact that's happening to that employee.
You, as you started talking then, you said that you think there is a time where this would be appropriate. And I can't see where there would be a moment in an organization at something like this where a leader would say,
Oh, not the leader to say that. I'm saying for this suggestion to come to them. Even if a
"Okay,
friend said to them, "Hey, you should use AI to get through this." Like, I don't think that's the right spot either.
yeah,
It's more just this AI as a resource for them. I think there's a time and a place for it, but not being suggested by anybody at that time
yeah."
when this layoff is happening.
Yeah. I think it's almost, I feel like there's something we could do to look at the sort of, I hate that I'm gonna do the change curve, but it's the, AI and the change curve, and kind of where it's appropriate to use it, where it's not. And or same with like the employee experience or the employee life cycle. Like there's certain points in there where it's going to become useful or helpful, but when we are such emotional creatures that to basically say go and talk to a robot,
Mhm.
good luck. Like that,
Right.
whoa, that's just so not okay.
Moving along now, we have been talking about hybrid work, quote unquote, for a very long time. And mostly it's been in terms of where people work. Is it home? Is it office? Is it somewhere in between? Last episode, Jenny, you talked, if we're going to keep talking about this. And I said, yes, we were. But what if the definition of hybrid really isn't about location? And what if it's more about who we work with? So, a recent Fast Company article introduced this idea of hybrid work evolving from human to human collaboration to human plus AI collaboration. The concept is this: your new teammate might not be a person, but an algorithm. AI is already taking meeting notes, generating first drafts, as you mentioned, suggesting talking points, and organizing workflows. And while that might sound futuristic to some, many of us are already using these tools like this every single day, whether we're even aware of it or not. But the real twist is, if AI is now a member of the team, what happens to team dynamics, trust, accountability, and even creativity? How do we manage or address this invisible coworker? Jenny, my question to you is, what do you think about reframing hybrid as human plus AI? Is this a helpful shift, or is just a clever rebrand? And what should comms and HR people be thinking about as AI becomes more integrated into how people collaborate?
I'm gonna call BS on this. Like, this is such I mean, come on. I'm all for a discussion about where things are going, but to write a whole article about, is hybrid actually something? No, no, it's not. Hybrid in work is working in it's location based, and we've worked alongside technology for a very long time. I have had the pleasure of working through things like fax machines. I didn't have a conversation about, oh, how am I going to work with this fax machine? Like, this fax machine is now part of my team and it's helping me send things or emails doing this. Like, it just feels
Wait,
like,
let's just
and I'm
pause
not
there for
allowed
a
to.
second. Let's just pause there for a second. I'm now envisioning a young Jenny in like the I forget what it's sort of like the printer room that office
Yeah.
places used to have that have like the printer and the fax machine and all the paper and supplies. And I'm like envisioning you like talking to the fax machine.
Well, that's exactly what this is. And also, our fax machine was in our office because we had to fax our press releases to the media. And like, I can visualize that. I can see that. And I'm doing the same thing as you, like, good morning, Frank the fax machine. Like, what are we what are we doing? Like, I get the whole we're starting to use technology in a very different way. So it does become like part of the team in terms of using it as an additional assistant or using it to help. I don't need to manage that. Like, that's technology. It's not going to go off and start doing something and I've got to have an appraisal. Like, no, I just think this is clickbait through and through. And I'm just no, no.
See, I like here's the reason I like the article because of the response you gave.
Yeah.
Like I actually
It's
like
achieved what it needed to achieve.
you did. I like it because it sort of forces you to come back to the point. And I think yes, are we going to change what we call hybrid or whatever? No, the labels are pretty set in stone on that. But I do think it's the dynamics that we talk about are changing in how we work and how we collaborate. And I think that's the more important part of the article. It's not it's kind of using that BS moment as you talked about it to kind of generate some excitement, but it's more about that collaboration. But I do think it's mission accomplished on this, Jenny, because it got the response that I was hoping to get.
It did. And now I'm thinking about naming all of my tech.
I think you should. I think you should
I
consider
think
that.
you should. I think that's gonna be my next task is what I shall call everything.
Personification of things makes them mean more. Like people name their cars things,
This
right?
is
Like
true.
it's
I
part of
don't.
that. So,
Do you name your
you know,
car?
of course,
What's the what's it called?
my car is called Stormbreaker. There's a whole reason to it because not that I'm calling myself Thor in any way, shape, or form, but at one
We'll
point
park that. Okay.
his original hammer was destroyed that he was very aligned with. At one point, I had a car that I was very aligned with, and it broke down, and I had to get a new car, and I felt very much like Thor on this journey. So
Okay.
yeah, Stormbreaker. My
Okay.
family hates it. They hate it.
Yeah.
They think it's
Okay.
so dumb. But anyway, maybe
Yeah.
that's an American thing. I don't know.
Oh, no, I don't name my car, but my sister's car she calls Skittle,
Okay, there
um,
you go.
because it's like a little skittles around thing. Yeah. But, yeah, I don't know anyone else that does. I'm gonna find out more people that name their cars.
Okay.
Anyway.
Maybe that'll be a good LinkedIn post of what people name their car, call their car.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to go completely out of the tech world for this next one, Jenny. We've been very AI centric to kick off this episode. So, amid all the noise about AI, automation, and scale, there is a surprisingly human reminder in a recent piece called The Simplest Growth Tool. The author argues that it's the most powerful tool for building trust, loyalty, and influence. I think something we hear communicators saying they want all the time is just simply being responsive, answering emails, replying to messages, following up. It sounds so obvious, but how many times have you reached out to someone and simply gotten silence in return? Or how often do we delay replying because we think the perfect response matters more than simply the timely one? The article suggests that responsiveness is an overlooked leadership skill and not just a basic courtesy. It communicates care, it builds momentum. And in an age where everything is trying to be optimized, there's something I think simply refreshing and powerful about someone who just gets back to you. Jenny, why do you think something as basic as responsiveness feels so rare today? And for communicators juggling a million inputs? That might be a bit dramatic. How do you prioritize being responsive, but without burning out?
So I love this because I'm all about the responsiveness, and I always feel really awful if I've said I'm going to do something and then time passes, and then you sort of think, do I still need to do it? And then you sort of don't get back to someone, and that's integrity, right? So we've got to think about that. But to me, that's a little bit of what this is, and I have quite high expectations of responsiveness, which I have to acknowledge is not the same for everybody else. But for me, it's massive in terms of knowing that you care. And even if I think of an example that's happened recently where I went to an event, I spoke to someone who provides a tech company, and we use their service, and I spoke to them, and I have a chat with someone. It's been a month, and then I get an email saying, "Oh, I've been away for a couple of weeks." I was like, it's been a month. Like, you haven't been away for a month. But I think the reason it doesn't happen is because people get busy, and then we use busy as an excuse. "Oh, I'm really sorry I haven't got back to you. I've just been so busy." And I hate that. And I read the book Busy by Tony Crabb about 8 years ago, and it stopped me from using that. There's loads of great insight in that book, but if you're too busy, you're just prioritizing other things. If you're using it as an excuse, you're just prioritizing other things. And if you can change that to, "Oh, I'm sorry I haven't got back to you. I have been prioritizing other things." It then feels very uncomfortable, but that's ultimately what it is. It's learning how to prioritize and figuring out what's important. I think the other thing, and I'm thinking about some conversations I've had with friends recently where I get quite irritated when they don't reply in a WhatsApp group chat. Um, even if there's a question, they still don't answer, and I'm like, "There's a question." And so we were joking about the sort of thumb up reaction, and I was like, "That's all you need to do. Like, if you don't know what to say, then just like, cool, that's fine." And I think we've got more tools in our technology world now to allow for that. But I do think sometimes we don't know what to say with the constant stream of stuff that's going on. But I think if someone's asking you a question, you absolutely have to reply. I think your point about communicators juggling a million inputs, how do you kind of prioritize all of that? For me, that was always about diarising time to do the responsiveness. So when I worked in house, I would always be doing those things sort of first thing. So I'm quite organized in my inbox. I've got categories and stuff like that, which to someone else is a complete waste of time, but it helps me know where I need to be. And I think that was always my job at the end of the day or the start of the day to make sure that I'm doing that. Now, I don't always get it right. There's some people that have emailed me and it's taken me months to reply, but that's because I was prioritizing other things. And I think you have to lean into that if you are doing that.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of the glorification of busy. It's like this, it creates this false level of importance, which
Yeah.
which I don't buy. However, this could come as no surprise to you, Jenny. I'm going to pat myself on the back for something here that I'm actually very proud of. That when I was in Toronto with you for Comms Reboot, a very close friend of mine emailed me some very, I would say, important and thoughtful career questions that she wanted my input on. And she's like, "Can you get back to me by a certain date with this information?" And I knew I couldn't do it right then. Traveling and just focus, and I wanted to give it some thoughtful time. So I simply replied to her and said, "Yes, I will do this. However, I want to give it the thought. I will reply to you on this by this point in time. So I'll get back to you then." I think that's where the communication comes in, not the big C
Yeah.
communication, the little c
Yeah.
communication of I hear you, I see the request, I want to be thoughtful. I can't be that right now, but I will be in the future and I will get back to you. Now, it was on me to then reply to her on time,
Mm.
which pat myself on the back, I did. But I think it's as simple as that. It's show that to me is showing responsibility and accountability and leadership and all the things that we want to see in communicators. And it's, you can still prioritize things and it can still be a low priority, but recognize and communicate back to say, "Hey, this is what I have going on right
Right.
now." And there's also this great TikTok meme series, whatever you want to call it, where people highlight something that they've been putting off for a very long time. And then they film themselves doing that moment, and normally it takes them like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's something they had been putting off forever, and all it took for them was 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So to your point, I think it's we can't always be in this
Mm.
state of responsiveness. I sometimes feel that pressure, but giving yourself time to respond is so valuable. It builds that trust, it builds that connection, and it costs nothing.
Mm.
It literally costs nothing to simply respond to people and either give them the answer they need or explain, hey, I can't come back to you right now. This is what I have going on. I will come back at this point in
Mm.
time. Or, hey, can you remind me in a week because of these things going on? Just communicate.
Yeah. And this is, I think, it is that simplest growth tool. It's that small thing that has such a big impact that makes people feel listened to. I do think though that there is also this issue, and I don't think it's only in the communication industry, where we can feel like everything's urgent. So I know there will be people that would have got an email like the one you got and feel like, oh my God, I've got to deal with this right now. And they would have got trapped in their own belief of an urgency that wasn't there. And I think we have this sort of false urgency thing a lot. I talk about it with my team quite a lot. Like, this isn't urgent. Like, if it's urgent, we communicate over here. If it's not urgent, like, do you know what I mean? Like it,
Hmm.
and I think sometimes when we're maybe sort of feel like we're rushing or we've got a lot on, everything can suddenly feel like I've got to do it right now. But I'm with you on the I can't answer this right now. I got something at Comms Reboot from one of my one-to-one coaching clients, and they'd sent me a message, and I'd replied and said I can't look at it until I'm back, blah blah blah. And then they sent me a voice note, which I just didn't listen to because I'd already said I'm going to be away. And then as soon as I was back, I said I'm back now, so I'm going to listen to it today, and then we'll kind of catch up. And that was fine, but we have to communicate those little things. And I think we underestimate that. And I say that all the time about credible leadership. We underestimate that you're destroying trust in the small moments. And it's these small moments that are doing it. It's not the big stuff.
Yeah, it's so simple, makes such a difference in the dynamic of relationships. And will also give this person credit. I'm going to pat her on the back for this. In making the request, she said, "Hey, I need this by this date."
Mm,
So that gave me okay, I have time, so let me communicate to her that I'm going to take that time to
yeah.
do it. So if someone asks for something and you can't deliver right then, simply ask them, when do you need this by? When do you need
Yeah.
this response by? When do you need this information? But they're like, oh, not for whenever you get to it. Well, that's also not helpful
Yeah.
either. But a week, a day, a month, whatever it is, that gives you a time frame to be like, how quickly do you need to
Yeah.
respond to them? It's simple stuff. It's
Yeah.
simple stuff. So our last one here, I felt like it was a bit of the Spider-Man meme where they're kind of all pointing at each other in the cartoon, that there were two different graphs shared on LinkedIn, so pretty much covering the same thing in different ways. So I thought it'd be good for us to talk about this, which was simply, what does internal comms control? So I think this is actually hopefully a very reflective and potentially therapeutic discussion for communicators to have, because you're going to get different answers. These two LinkedIn posts caught my eye because they asked the question, like, what do we control as internal communicators? The first post asked the question outright, encouraging people in comms to identify what's truly in their scope. And the second, slightly different voice, but a powerful reminder, is that not everything is yours to fix. For anyone in internal comms, I think these two messages hit pretty deep, both on the control and the yours to fix part. We're often the ones cleaning up after potential leadership missteps or translating vague strategies into something employees can understand, smoothing over cultural issues that weren't ours to begin with in the first place. And then when things break down, can feel like there's an unspoken expectation that we'll be the glue, even if we weren't the ones who cracked it in the first place. But this mindset of I'll just fix it, while might be helpful in the short term, can potentially lead to resentment, burnout, and even role confusion, which I think is also an interesting topic for us to talk about. And especially now as AI adds new layers of responsibility and expectation. So my question to you, Jenni, is how do communicators learn to draw the line between being helpful and being responsible for everything? And do you think setting better boundaries might actually help us be more effective in the long run?
So I have thoughts. So I think to answer your second question of setting better boundaries might make us more effective in the long run, 100% yes. In my experience working inside organizations, I've always been helpful, but I've always had boundaries and I've always stayed firm on those around deadlines and things that need to be delivered. If you move those all the time, then you are destroying that trust and relationship and the credibility of your function. So if you're not setting those boundaries or you're not holding people to any of those things that you're putting in place, then you're not going to be able to operate at a strategic level because you're going to be too stuck doing stuff. What I found interesting about these two posts was the split between what's within the control and what's out of control. And one of them talked about influence, what's, outside the control, what's influence of internal comms, what's the control of internal comms, and the other one was just kind of in and out of control. And we'll obviously pop the links to these in there. But it just, to me, shows the huge challenge in the internal comms industry at the moment. When I look at things like the trends at the start of this year, I look at posts like this, I look at what's coming up at conferences and events. It's so broad and there's so much. And it's like we've forgotten actually what is in the control of internal comms and what the internal comms function is really there to do. And I think getting that clarity is so important. It's something we do with clients when we do workshops looking at strategy, like what's your purpose, what's in scope, what's out of scope. But I also think this is a bigger piece about what internal communication has tried to become in the last 5 years and actually the reality of what it's able to be. And I think there is a bit of a moment coming where there's going to be a reality moment of those things within the control of internal comms. And in one of the posts, it's channel management, internal brand alignment, content governance, messaging strategy, organizational listening, and leadership communication support. That's the stuff that's in the control. The other one talks about fairly similar things, doesn't talk so much about channels. But for me, those are the things that are in your control. Yet we spend a lot of time talking about bigger and broader things around organizational culture and employee experience. Those are the things I really love talking about and you love talking about. But I had a moment in September last year where I was thinking, I don't know that I really do internal comms anymore because I'm not doing, I don't do very much on the channels and the content. I do more strategy and I do one-to-one support and it's sort of it's in and around, but it's not the kind of core purpose of that function. And I think we've lost our way a bit. And I think there's a divide coming that's going to be this in our control and what the comms function, internal comms function is there to do. And then there's going to be this broader stuff, which is more in employee experience and strategy and organizational design and the bigger stuff. And that's where the strategic internal comms people are going to go. I think it's going to split.
When I was looking at both of these, I reflected back on now, I think it's 7 or 8 years ago when Alan Orm and I collaborated on the periodic table of internal communications.
Yes.
And for the
Yeah.
last year or two, we have teased each other about delivering an update on it. It was primarily created to showcase the complexity of the world that we all operate in. And it's not just complicated, but it also is very complex. And I was also thinking about this too from like an internal monologue, an external monologue standpoint of saying to yourself, okay, that's not my job, is very
Me.
different than saying that externally to someone who comes to you and asks, and you're like, hey, that's not my job. And I was trying to figure out how to resolve those two things. And I don't have an answer because there is some boundary setting here, but you never want to be that person that people don't go to either.
Mm.
I think you want to be a resource. Now, your resource might not be you do the work. Your resource
Yeah.
might be you navigate them
Yes.
to the person who does the work. So I'm not a big like consultancy framework person, but I feel like we could probably crowdsource a RACI,
Yeah.
RACI about what is the internal comms world. And you would get, if you asked 100 people, you would get 100 different answers.
100%.
And
100%.
that's going to be either from their personal preference of what they want to do
Yeah.
versus also what their company expects them
Mm.
to do. And I think that is sometimes where that conflict exists between what that personal desire to own or influence or be in control of versus what the company actually wants you to
Yeah.
influence or control. And I think that conflict is going to change wherever you go based on your career level or industry or company.
Yeah, 100%. And I had this conversation on my workplace huddle last, which was today as we're recording, and we were talking about exactly this. Like, how do you navigate that alignment between what the organization wants, what you want? How do you go from being tactical to strategic? How do you navigate all of those things? And I think that it is going to be different everywhere. And I don't think there's a way of standardizing it, and I think that's part of the challenge is people have tried and you can't do that. But at its fundamental level, it's the channels and the content, and I think we've lost that focus, and part of that, I say that because we're still fixing intranets and governance and all the basic stuff that still isn't right. So if we're spending all this time up here and around here thinking I can control the things I can influence or the things that are out of my control, but we need to come back over here and actually fix the channels and the infrastructure and the content. And I think that's I don't say it's not challenging. I just think we've taken our eye off the ball a little bit.
I was thinking about this too, and we'll move along on this, but it almost feels like, okay, if we put this back into the science terms, like what's in our solar system? Like, what are the planets that are closest to us that we do a lot, and what are the planets that are a little further out that maybe we don't touch as much, but we still have, like,
Mm,
it's still in our orbit, to keep with this
okay.
analogy. And every now and then a comet comes flying through the middle that you got to keep an eye on. I think there might be something here I'm going to play with
I
as far
feel
as
I can
like,
I can see it. You're going from periodic tables to solar systems.
yeah,
I can see that.
I'll consult my wannabe friend Neil deGrasse Tyson on this one to see where he feels about comparing the world of internal comms to a solar system.
Huh.
And on that note, Jenni, that wraps up the articles that I've selected today. What is your freak out of the week?
So my freak out of the week is just feeling quite overwhelmed in a supermarket, which which feels a bit weird. So I'm was going to get burger buns for a barbecue because it's quite warm here in the UK. And I was doing it quite early, and like all these things, are sort of going, oh, I'll get that, and I'll get that, and I'll get that. I'll go get burger buns. And I was just stood there. It's got nothing to do with comms at all. And I was like, there's so many buns. There's there's buns with seeds, there's buns without seeds, there's brioche buns, then there's just different brands. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'll get some bagels for something else. But then there's about 20 different bagel brands and different types. And then there's thins and then there's not thins. And I was like, there's 4 aisles about bread and there's just so much. So I didn't buy any buns or bagels because I decided I would try again another day. But it just made me realize how much choice there is out there. And I think we've talked on this about how many decisions we make as human beings every day. And I just couldn't make a decision on buns in the end and thought I'll try again another day. But there's so much. And when people talk about the mental load a lot at the moment, and I just had, as I've called it, bun paralysis in the supermarket.
I just figured you'd have gone for like what's the cheapest ones, which is never a good decision.
No, because that's not how you
Never a
can
good
make the
decision.
decision. And then I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I came home and said to Martin, my husband, I said, "I got bun paralysis in the supermarket." So I'm gonna go to a different, smaller supermarket tomorrow and there'll be less choice, and I think that'll maybe make it easier for me to select my buns.
Do they have Costco in the UK?
Yes.
Okay. That's Costco's entire business model is limited selection.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I mean, this was a huge supermarket. It's Tesco's, which I
Yep.
might be like a Target or something like that over there, but
Mhm.
it's, I mean, it's a huge Tesco store, it is a superstore, but there was just too much. I was like, "Who needs this many choices for bread?"
Clearly
And
you
that's my
do.
freaking out this week. What's yours?
My freak out is a bit of a 10-year personal journey that I've been on, and I posted about this on LinkedIn. Was actually I love seeing the responses on this. And I didn't know whether to do it or not. So I casted some votes and got some opinions from some friends, including you, Jenni. And
Mhm.
I won't give everyone what you said to do, but I'll just say it rhymes with schmon't do it. And
That's not what I said.
so I did it anyway, and I bought the domain ecology.com. And it sounds very trivial, but ever since I started the podcast, this domain has been out there, and everybody's like, why didn't you just buy it when $15? It wasn't available. It was actually another company owned that domain. They didn't end up doing anything with it. Somebody in that company just kept renewing it because they knew there was value to it, and the price was astronomical. And it was always this item out there that it bugged me that it wasn't mine,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel this great sense of ownership to ecology, and it wasn't mine. And I also just hated this idea of someone else having it. And the price finally dropped to a point where I was like, I need to do it. And so now I'm like, it's this thing that's been out there for a decade, that's been out of my reach. And I finally have it. And I was immensely proud to purchase it. And I had a little bit of a freak out moment. And when I posted on LinkedIn, the number of stories that people shared about their joy in finally being able to get a domain they wanted, or like my friend Rocky Walls told this story about, there was like a I want to say like a construction company or something that literally built Rocky Walls.
Oh, wow.
They had the domain forever. And he even talked about it in one of his talks about, if you Googled his name, he never saw him. You literally saw walls made of
Wow.
rock. So I appreciated some of the sentiment and some of the celebration with me. So yeah, ecology.com is mine. That was my freak out of the week.
I love it. I'm pleased that you've done it. And as I did say to
Yes.
you, everyone has different values, different things. And if it's the right for you, and you can't put a price on anything when there's a value attached to it. And I think that's your personal value. So I'm very pleased because I know how much joy it's brought you. And that
Yes.
brings me joy.
Says the person who owns the jennifield.com.
Well, I mean, I am the Jenny Fields, let's be honest.
Thank you all for joining us this week. All the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes, and please do not forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone you think would enjoy listening or watching, because you can now find us on YouTube. Thank you to my friend Poet Ali for contributing music to the show. We will be back next week with more news, insights, opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up. And Jenni, who knows, maybe we'll still be celebrating your birthday a week later.
Absolutely.